So, the Chaos Survival event is coming up soon, and I thought I would take a look at my roster and explain the choices I've made in preparing for the event, and probably some of the tactics I'll be using whilst I complete it. So, in the run-up to the event, there wasn't much time, and I only had enough resources and time to get Rockbone to Diamond 2 from Diamond 1, Khan up to Diamond 1 from about Gold 2 or something. I really put a lot of stuff into him, and Maladus to Diamond 1 from Gold 3. Of course, Asgore, once you reach the legendary waves, he gets given to you for free at Diamond 3, so that's another diamond I will have, but that's essentially the extent of diamonds I could get in time for the event. For the earlier waves, I will be bringing along Corodius, and I have his active ability maxed out for Epic, so up until the legendary waves he should be doing just fine. He's basically maxed out for Epic rarity, and I really think that his boost to movement will come in handy to help my Maladus and Rotbone especially get around the map and potentially pick up power-ups, get kills, which they otherwise wouldn't really be able to do because of their very sluggish movement. And Corodius will obviously inevitably die once I get to the legendary waves because the Tyranids that get spawned are so strong. But at that point, you're getting swarmed by so many things that I don't think the extra movement will really be that much of a worry anymore. It'll more be, oh crap, I'm completely mobbed by enemies and I can't really move anyway. So I'm okay with that, having 4 characters to rely on for the legendary waves. I very much doubt I'll be getting through them. I'm mainly just aiming to at least beat the first legendary wave so that I can get the free Codices of War as the reward, which is very nice. And here, as well, in preparation for this event, I've upgraded Rotbone, Khan, and Maladus. And those 3 are all characters I'm very much happy to level up. And we don't know how often survival events will come around. You know, the next survival event, it might be Xenos. We might never even use Chaos characters in a survival event again. Honestly, who knows? It's very much up in the air. So I decided that if I was going to invest in characters for this event, or, any other survival events in the future, I would not invest in any that I wouldn't be happy to spend the resources on. So, for example, I would not be putting any resources into Angrax for this because I've completed Fall of Cadia Elite and I don't think he's a very good character. So someone like Angrax is completely off the table. Same for Archimatos or Harken or, whoever else. But Rotbone, Maladus will always be useful in LREs. Khan is a good PvP unit, arena unit. He's got his uses in raids if you don't have, the perfect optimal multi-hit teams. So all of those I think are good investments, and I think that is something you should definitely bear in mind if you're preparing in this way. Another thing about Khan and Maladus as well is that they can do a lot of damage. And if anyone tells you, oh, you need to bring tanky characters, well, I guess I am bringing tanky characters, but I think what's more important against the Tyranids is not allowing them to mob you. And even more important, well, I'll explain that, because Termagants, they get an extra hit for every Termagant that is adjacent to them in their ranged attack, and Hormagaunts get an extra hit against anything that they attack for every other Hormagaunt or Ripper Swarm that is adjacent to their target, aside from them. So Tyranids really ramp up their attack power fast when they mob you, and the last thing you want is to be thinking, oh well, I'll bring Toth because he's tanky and he can take a lot of hits. Okay, sure, he can take a lot of hits, but if he can't kill any Tyranids because he deals sod all damage, all that's going to happen is you're going to be mobbed by Tyranids, you won't be able to get through them in time, you won't be able to overkill any of them unless you get lucky, probably, which means you'll be less likely to benefit from battle fatigue. And of course, if you don't kill them fast enough and the rarity of the enemies being spawned in goes up and your characters are still capped at common rarity, then they're all going to die very quickly. So the key in survival events tankiness, sure, it plays a part. It has to, because you can't have your characters dying in one hit, but realistically you want to be killing stuff as quickly as possible, and that's the kind of philosophy I've gone for here. And Maladus and Khan, not only do they deal a lot of damage, but also their passives really help in clearing out enemies fast. Khan's passive, it allows him to move toward enemies if he's not in melee with them at the start of the turn, and get an attack in before you even need to do anything manually. And then you can attack with him again and then get another passive hit. So that's up to 3 enemies that he can directly kill in a single turn, and that's not even including battle fatigue. Obviously, Maladus has his passive ability, which acts like a sort of cleave, where he can hit 3 adjacent melee targets. So both of them, I think, are pretty much the top chaos choices for killing stuff as quickly as possible. Now, who do you want to get your power-ups on? Actually, before I go into that, I'm bringing Rotbone as well. I haven't really mentioned him. It is essentially inevitable that you're going to be taking attritional damage in this event, because you're just being mobbed by Tyranids from all sides. They can get to you very easily. The map's quite small, so you will be taking attrition damage, which means that you either are going to have to heal up that attrition, or you're going to have to throw in a bunch of characters that you don't really want to have sort of in the end game in early, so that they can take the early hits and die, and then hopefully, if you're lucky, you can replace them with the characters you want at the end. I don't really want to leave things up to chance in that way, so I'm bringing Rotbone along to keep everyone topped up and healthy, hopefully, and if I make any major mistakes, he might be able to get a revive off as well. Of course, I am bringing Corrodius too, and he acts as quite a good sort of panic button, I guess you can call it, where if he uses active ability, it spawns in a lot of meat shields, which can deal a good amount of damage immediately to anything that's adjacent to them. And they can also take a fair number of hits, even if they die in one attack. The fact that they take an attack means that that's an attack that's not hitting one of your characters. So I think he's just a good option in general, and also the movement boost he gives means that Rotbone can kind of move around and potentially heal people up more easily, just if they otherwise might be out of reach. The one thing you do have to be wary of, though, is having a Poxwalker next to Rotbone die, and then he revives it with his passive ability, and then a character next to Rotbone dies, and of course he's already used his passive ability, so he fails to revive them with 100% probability rather than 25%. So that is one thing to be very wary of with Poxwalkers, is just don't let Rotbone get his priorities all mixed up. So I think that's all I have to say on the base team and why I've chosen them. Obviously Ascor is mandatory, and so yeah, Ascor, you're just going to have to use him. Tough if you don't like him. Now it's on to, of course, the other aspect of the game mode, which is the power-ups, and who I will be getting the power-ups for. Now, in terms of defense, I think if you look at Rotbone and Maladus, Maladus got 1,600 armor, Rotbone's got 2,000. I think that's enough to weather pretty much any attacks until you get to the really late waves, and I think most of the damage they'll be getting will be done via the pierce ratio mechanic. So, biological damage will just be doing 30% pierce damage to them, rather than massively exceeding their armor stat and really hurting them. So I think who I would get the defense bonus on is Khan, because he is naturally just the least armored of all of the characters that I want to have in the end game. As for the health power up, I had noticed something with that in the previous survival event. It adds 200% health to your character based on their current health that they have at the time. So I picked up the health power up on Titus during one of the epic stages, and he has a base health of around 2,500 at epic rarity, so that added 5,000 health to give him 7,500 total. But then, when I got to the legendary stages. He got scaled up to Diamond 3, but the additional health did not get scaled up in any way. So his base health went up to, I think it's 9,500 off the top of my head. I can't remember exactly, but something like that at Diamond 3. So if the health bonus was kept as a percentage boost, you'd expect his health to go up to around 30,000. Going from epic to legendary, if he had picked up the health power-up at epic rarity. However, that's not what happened. It just remained as a static 5,000 hit point bonus. So if you can, what you really want to do is to wait until the legendary stage before you pick the health power-up up. Otherwise you're severely limiting the amount of utility it has later on in the game. And that means kind of trying to play carefully, of course, and making sure none of the Tyranids pick it up. So obviously if a lot of Termagants are going to be spawning in the next wave, don't stand 2 hexes away from the health power-up, because you might have a Termagant running onto it to shoot at your characters. Who would I get the health power-up on? Well, again, I think it's a case of Khan. And the reason for this is based on Rotbone's healing. Now, Rotbone, he does 970 heal at his current level, so multiply that by 4, because he's healing is calculated by hits times by base damage. So he does 4 hits, and he does a base damage of 970. So you're expecting a heal of about 3,880, or just under 3,880 from him. And I haven't gone into this yet, but I plan on getting the damage power-up onto Rotbone, and that doubles his base damage, which means that his healing is also doubled because it's based on his damage stat. So he'll be doing around 7,800 healing per round. So if Khan only has a maximum health pool of 5,050 points, essentially, even if he gets taken down to 1 hit point and I heal him up with Rotbone, that will be 2,800 hit points worth of healing. That is essentially, if you want to call it wasted, I'd call it wasted, because Rotbone can heal up to 7,800 hit points. Maladus, he has 7,000 hit points, so there won't be much wastage healing him up, but there would be a lot of wastage no matter what healing Khan. And I do kind of want Khan to stay alive for a decent amount of time, because he does obviously quite a lot of damage, and I think that will be very useful to me. Again, in terms of thinning out the horde, as I was talking about, which is really the best method of trying to survive, is not tanking, it's killing lots of stuff fast. And Khan is very, very good at that. So if I get the health power up on Khan in the legendary stage, that will add 10,000 to his health, which will be quite a nice boost, and it will mean that Rotbone will have plenty of leeway to play with, where he won't be wasting health, hopefully, too much healing up Khan. So the health goes on to Khan. Now I've already mentioned it, so I might as well go into it. Rotbone gets the damage bonus, and that is, again, as I said, purely based on the bonus to healing. The characters, they're going to be taking a heck of a lot of damage in the legendary stages, and so it's just going to be mandatory that he's going to be needing to do as much healing as he possibly can. Now, I did say that his healing value is based both on his damage and the number of hits he deals, and that picking up the damage power-up will boost the amount of healing he does. This is how it works in Tournament Arena. However, picking up any of the bonus hit power-ups do not increase his healing. Don't ask me why, it's just the way it is. So, in my opinion, the bonus hit power-ups are sort of wasted on Rotbone. So who would I put the bonus hits on? Well, I've mentioned Khan doing a lot of damage, but actually I think they would be best on Maladus, and I'll go into that. So, a character's base damage is based on the amount of hits they do. If they do a low number of hits, say Matineo or Sarquail, whatever, they'll do sort of, well, Matineo does 40 damage per hit at base, Sarquail does, I think, 65 or 55, something like that. which is, oh, that might mean nothing to you if you're not really interested in looking at the stats of the characters, but that's decently to quite high. So Matineo doing 40 base damage. He picks up the melee hits power up, which gives him 4 extra hits. So that's quintupling his damage, which means that he's now doing 200 base damage, which is actually quite insane. It's double the amount of base damage that Khan does, and Khan is obviously a massive damage dealer. And in general, the hits power-ups are more effective the fewer the hits that your character has at base. So Maladus has 3 hits, so an increase of getting a melee power-up, which gives you 4 extra hits, will be increasing his damage output by 133%. If I got it on Khan, it would be increasing it by 100%, same for Rockbone. So there's not much leeway there, but there's more reason to it than that. And you might be saying, well, Azkor has 2 hits, so if I got the melee hits power up on him, that would be a 200% increase in his damage output. And while that is true, I'll have Azkor at Diamond 3, and his passive also boosts his damage by up to 150%, I believe. So Azkor already does plenty of damage, and I'm just expecting him to essentially instantly pulverize anything that he attacks, short of maybe Tyrant Guard when it's got its passive activated, but even then I kind of doubt it. I think he will be an absolute killing machine. And also, when Azkor does inevitably one-shot whatever he's attacking, that's it. So if it has 2,000 health and he does 10,000 health to it, that's 8,000 damage. That's just gone poof, up into the air, disappeared, completely useless. Maladus, on the other hand, if he's doing a lot of damage, if he's doing 10,000 damage and he hits an enemy for 2,000 damage and kills it, well, he's still got 8,000 damage left that his passive can use to then hit another up to 2 other targets adjacent to his initial one. So the more damage you pile on Maladus, the better, in my opinion, because it means he'll be able to spread that damage around and basically waste a lot less of it than other characters who can only hit a single target with their attacks. Again, there is a case to be made for Khan because the hits power-ups also boost the number of hits his passive does. So yeah, I'm a bit torn on that, but I think Maladus might just last a little longer than Khan. I'm not sure. It's kind of debatable, but those are my thoughts on that anyway. And I think that's pretty much covering all of the bases in terms of strategy. I think picking up some of the power-ups will come down to is just who can get there the fastest, and that's why I have Corodius, which will give me a bit more flexibility to get characters like Maladus and Rockbone over to power-ups more quickly, when otherwise I might have to get, say, the damage power-up on Khan instead, because I can't get over to it with Rockbone in time. That gives me a bit more leeway to get the right power-ups for the right characters, which is, again, another good reason to bring Corodius along. But I think that's about it for my thoughts on this, so before I sort of ramble inanely any longer, I think I'll leave it at that.